work in a hospital. In fact, I was what you'd call sent out to pasture because I got to that magical figure of 65 and they thought I was too old to work. So I was retired. But then I found out too much energy to sit at home. And this young lady kicked me out of the house because I was getting in her way. So I had to go back to doing sessions at the hospital. But we've been involved in this business and opportunity for quite a while. It's become a lifestyle for us, and it's perhaps what is responsible for where we're at the moment, both physically and also financially. So she asked me to do men's health, although she is the expert in this, but still I have to oblige. So what I'm going to do, I hope this works for me. There we go. I'd initially thought that I'd play you a little clip, but technology is not being my best friend today. So instead, you can copy that link and go and listen to that song when you get time. But the whole point is that usually there's a big misconception around that men are supposed to be tough and expected not to show any emotion or pain, for that matter. What this does then is that we tend to sit on our problems and not to discuss them with anybody until it's very late when things have gone off target. And as a result, when people fall sick, the men folk especially, their conditions are discovered when it's actually quite late. And then over the last few decades, there's been an increase in what we call lifestyle diseases. Lifestyle diseases are non-communicable diseases, for example, hypertension, diabetes, and obesity, which affects both men and women. But specifically for men, I'm going to touch on two things that I think of topical interest at the moment. One of them is the prostate, which is a very important organ in men. And that organ is only present in men. And it causes a range of problems, which I'm going to touch on just now. So when we talk about the North American Standard Diet, what you might call abbreviated as SAD, WHO and CDC reported that by 2020, 3 out of 4 deaths in the world will be caused by what you call chronic lifestyle-related diseases. You can change this from North America to South Africa because we copied their diet almost very closely. Remember, whenever development occurs, the first thing that happens is Coca-Cola and McDonald's enters that country. So the same diseases affecting America are affecting South Africa as well. And when CDC and WHO made this prediction, they had not thought about COVID, which came in 2020. But one could argue that if you look at the people most affected by COVID, it's the same group of people with lifestyle diseases, which we are going to enumerate just now. So as I said, 3 out of 4 will be caused by chronic lifestyle diseases. These chronic lifestyle diseases include things like cardiovascular disease, cardiovascular things like heart attack, which is a common one that you hear about, cardiovascular like high blood pressure, which is common. And then also you've got chronic respiratory diseases. This, somebody was joking about it, that we actually breathe in so many toxins that all of us could be branded as smokers because of the air pollution that goes on. Just as an aside, when COVID started and lockdown started, the air quality in most countries improved so dramatically that people wondered whether they'll be able to go back to cars again. But as you notice now in South Africa, the number of cars on the roads has gone back to where it was before. So pollution, I'm afraid, is going to come back. So chronic respiratory diseases like asthma, chronic obstructive airway disease, which is something that comes later in life, and emphysema. Diabetes is on the rise. Now, in the old days, it used to be that diabetes was 2 types. There was the maturity onset, which only afflicted older people who had put on a lot of weight, and also what they call juvenile, which afflicted people from a young age. But now, because of the differences, or rather the poor choices that we make in life, this is now being seen across all the age ranges. There's no longer any sort of like hard and fast classification between the two. We're seeing it in ages that never used to have it before. And then, of course, we've got the cancers, the various ones, and neurological problems like Alzheimer's, and as people grow older, they become more forgetful. All these affect both men and women, but today what we're talking about mainly is about things that affect men particularly. I said that the prostate gland is only in men. Now, the prostate gland, I'm not going to do any anatomy lessons here, but it's somewhere at the base of the bladder, and it's a pea-sized walnut, I think they say. It's not a very big gland. Its health affects the health of men big time. And things that can affect it range from what we call prostatitis, which is an infection. It can be either acute or chronic, and this causes pain. This normally you find in younger people who've been a bit naughty and have acquired a sexually transmitted disease, which can then cause the organ to be, or the gland to be infected, inflamed. And then we've got what we call benign prostatic hypertrophy, which is abbreviated BPH, that one there. And this one I put here as stream issues. In other words, the flow of urine, as the man stands to pass urine, is affected. So there will probably be no pain, but the first thing the person will notice is that he cannot, when he's weeing, shoot the stream as far as he wants to. The joke was that kids, when they're still young, they can even pee up to the ceiling. But as we get older, we cannot go that far. So fortunately, all the toilets are at floor level, so we don't have to aim at the ceiling. The last one is cancer, of course, and cancer of the prostate is on the rise. In fact, in South Africa, we've had some very prominent examples. Our first Black South African president suffered the same thing. Our Archbishop, who is still around, is still battling it. And as I say, it's quite common at the older you get. And then for Black men, more risk than other races. So the recommendation is that once you hit the age of 40, you must start screening for it. And the screening involves two modalities. The first one is what they call a PSA, where they measure the level of the hormone or the enzyme in the blood. And the levels, the absolute levels, I think they talk about 4 or so. But I think the main thing here is that if it's rising, then you should be concerned, not just the absolute figure. It's recommended that if you're over 40, you should do this at least once a year. The other screen is not that pleasant, and so people usually run away from it. And that involves a doctor doing an examination, which I shall not mention in polite society. Suffice it to say that most of the prostate problems, if they are detected early, they're actually treatable. And that's why it's important that we should actually be on the lookout and make sure that we screen. The second one I've abbreviated as ED, which stands for erectile dysfunction. Again, no anatomy lessons here, but just suffice it to say that the fate of the mankind rests in proper erectile function. Otherwise, if it's not there, the human race wouldn't be there. Now, there are multiple causes that affect sexual performance in men, and it's a very emotional subject which can be quite distressing, both for the men and their partners. Some of the causes include what I've just mentioned when I was talking about the general illnesses of lifestyle. Things like diabetes will affect it. Things like what you call chronic circulatory diseases will affect the blood flow, that part of the anatomy, and can cause erectile dysfunction. So again, it's something that men may not feel comfortable to talk about, even when they go to consult a doctor, you sometimes have to dig this information out. So I'm putting it out there that is something perhaps as Neolife distributors, we should encourage people to talk about. What are the causes of health challenges in men? As I said, it's mainly from poor lifestyle choices. These ones range from convenience of fast foods due to our fast-paced life. We find it difficult to actually sit and have a proper meal or have the time to cook a proper meal, putting all the ingredients together from scratch. So it's much easier to go and buy frozen this, frozen that, put it in a microwave, or at the office, buy some Kentucky or whatever takeaway. And this, of course, leads to dietary deficiencies. Then the other thing that has caused a bit of a problem is that we like to travel by car. Very few of us will cycle or walk. And then when you get to a building, even if it's only 2 or 3 floors, we still take a lift to go upstairs. And then, of course, our work involves sitting for long periods of time. This leads to lack of exercise, which also leads to what you call chronic health challenges. And now, because of the lockdown and what have you, there's more people working from home. In the house, it's been said that because of the household things that we use and all the, what you call it, furniture and what have you, we actually may have more toxins in the house than in the environment outside. So now the men who are working from the office and escaping that, leaving it to their wives in the kitchen, are now working from home and exposing themselves to the same toxins. And then, of course, because of the increased reliance on technology, we're exposed to blue light, which affects our quality of sleep and affects our ability to rest. So recommendation here, please people, is that make sure you switch off your cell phone. It's recommended that you do that at least 2 hours before your bedtime. Right. There's been overwhelming research to show that actually part of the problem is inflammation. And this was a time cover from sometime a few years ago. I can't read that time, but there was a lot of research that shows that heart attacks, cancer, Alzheimer's, and other chronic diseases are linked to inflammation. And to that inflammation, you add its evil twin called oxidation. And this occurs from all the factors that I've just mentioned. The final pathway of how the environmental toxins, your poor choices of diet, etc., how they end up causing disease in the body is by a combination of inflammation and oxidation, which actually messes with your DNA itself, the very function of the nucleus, and that causes the soil to become sick. What do we do about this? That old proverb comes to mind: a stitch in time saves 9. In other words, prevention is better than cure. As I mentioned earlier on, regular checkups will help us to pick up these challenges early and deal with them at a treatable stage. Sorry, just let me meet somebody here. But in all things, we need a balance in life, and all things must be done in moderation. So I picked up this, I hope you can see this, the Wheel of Life. It's got several areas. Now, you may find different sorts of wheels of life all over the place, but broadly, they include things like your mental, your career, your personal, financial, physical, family, social, and spiritual. For some of us, spiritual is number 1, our relationship to our Creator and how we perceive that. Then mental, how we keep ourselves competent mentally. Our career, so that the whole idea is that you balance all these areas of your life so that none of them, like for example, you shouldn't be pursuing financial and career up to the maximum to the detriment of your spiritual, for example, or your family. Because once you lose these, then it will be very difficult to catch them later on. And of course, what we're talking about now is physical, your energy, your health, and vitality. Because once you lose, you spend all your time making money, you will spend all that money trying to get your health back, which is not a very good equation. These are some of the lifestyle modifications that can help to modulate what I've just mentioned as huge problems. If you smoke and drink, that's an obvious no-brainer. You should stop doing that. Try and eat a healthy, balanced diet. Now, this is a bit difficult because even if you try very hard, because of the way our agriculture has become commercialized, the new chemicals that they use, etc., etc., it becomes difficult to actually get a balanced diet. And that's where I'll point out a bit later on, Neolife comes in. If you're above the ideal weight, this BMI stands for body mass index. You can Google that and look at what your ideal should be. It shouldn't be less than 18 and it mustn't be more than 23. So you should reduce weight to try and maintain that ideal BMI. That will help a lot with your health. Exercise, as I mentioned, a sedentary lifestyle is one of the worst things you can do to yourself. And exercise includes things like going out into the sun, fresh air, drinking plenty of water while you're doing all this. And then, of course, to try and manage stress, especially chronic stress. And that means, for example, if you are working in a 9 to 5, like some of us still do, every so often find a way to let out your stress. For example, spiritual, the word, prayer, gym for those who do exercises, a walk, or if you're sitting at a computer all the time, stand up, look outside the window, appreciate God's creation. And then, of course, the major one is to supplement with a good quality whole food supplement. And some of you, I'm sure, are saying, oh, are you talking to me? Because this is what Neolife offers, good whole food supplements. Ideally, our diet should look something like this. A huge base sitting on a lot of exercise and fresh air and all that. A huge base of high fiber, whole grain foods should be what we're eating most of the time. On top of that, almost of equal importance, fruits and vegetables we should be eating plenty of. And then in reducing amounts, good quality proteins that are not too fat and that animals are not factory reared, but hopefully organically grown and free range, for example, for chicken and eggs. And then a much smaller amount of things like sugar, oils, and chocolate. I know ladies love chocolate, but eat small amounts of that. Now, unfortunately, in our modern diet, we've turned this upside down. And we are paying the price for it. Because as they say, you are what you eat. And reality is that 75% of all chronic diseases are actually preventable. Preventable in the sense that if you don't watch your diet, this is beer, by the way, lots and lots of processed meats, and there's chips, and crisps everywhere will give you that body shape. And that's the body shape that you get your chronic illnesses from. But if you change that into whole food and you get fresh fruits and vegetables, organically reared chicken, and if you eat meat, not too much of it, this is what you get as a body shape, which is healthy. Why is Neolife so important in men's health? So just to recap a bit, men are also subject to the same diseases, same chronic illnesses as everybody is in this modern day and life. And we've just seen that most of them are preventable and that we need to be vigilant. And no matter how vigilant we are, it's always not enough because of the modern agricultural way of producing things, that there are gaps in our nutrition. And that's where Neolife comes in with a very revolutionary idea, and that is cellular nutrition. Cellular nutrition just simply means your cells are hungry, so feed them at that level. Most of the food that you get out of that is processed fats and what have you, do not address that cellular hunger, because the cell wall is a very unique membrane that is made of a special bilipid membrane, which is a very special biochemistry. And as far as I know, only this supplement, which is pioneered by Neolife, addresses that cellular, by what you call it, by phospholipid membrane that makes up our cell membrane. So TrueNN addresses that chemistry and makes the cells more permeable so that nutrients get in and waste matter gets out. And I put this up first because no matter how good your nutritional program is, unless you go back to basics and start with a foundation, and that is TreeNN, to make sure that the cell will be able to absorb, assimilate, and use whatever nutrition that you're using. So TreeNN as a foundation for everything. And no matter what your budget is, everybody should be able to afford this. And that's why one of the kits is actually a TreeNN kit. These are our core products. The core meaning that it covers the basics in that the Neolife Shake is the only one that has got the 22 essential amino acids that we need in our body in the right proportion. It's highly bioavailable. And when we look at the protein score, it's got one of the highest protein scores in the market. Our nearest competitor, I think, has only about 14 or so amino acids, not the full 22. And then there is the Pro Vitality, which I think was a very revolutionary idea. If I go to my next slide, I'll show you why. Pro Vitality combines TreeNN, which I've just talked about, combines omega-3 salmon oil plus, which is essential for dealing with inflammation, dealing with oxidation, and also preventing cardiovascular problems. It's one of the only ones on the market that's got all essential, 8 fractions of the omega-3. It's not extracted with chemicals. So what you get is pure, and the fish are sourced from where there's very little pollution. And after it's manufactured, it goes through quality testing to make sure that there's no toxins or heavy metals. Carotenoid complex, again, a revolutionary product from Neolife. No other company has it. This is the most powerful antioxidant that we've got. And it's actually anti-cancer, anti-aging, anti-everything that you can think of. And it fills in those gaps that normal fruits and vegetables that you buy from the shop will not be able to fulfill. And to round it off is multivitamin and minerals as well. So you get all these 4 in a conveniently packaged form. 30 sachets in a box. You take 1 sachet every day. You don't have to remember different bottles. So it's very conveniently packaged. Moving on, for specifically men's health, remember I mentioned the prostate. Chelated zinc is again a first from Neolife, in that most other manufacturers, when they produce zinc, it's in its ionic form, which is very poorly absorbed. Ours is chelated. In other words, it's 2 amino acids attached to the zinc, and that causes it to be absorbed very well. And zinc is responsible for keeping your prostate supple and making sure that you do not catch all the conditions that I mentioned earlier on, among other benefits of zinc, including things like, in my case, when I used to have ulcers, it was a lifesaver. In your hair, for example, your nails, etc., they're all benefiting from zinc. As I said, it's the only company that has got a chelated form, which is very well absorbed. The next one is vitamin E. Again, the same story in that our vitamin E is not like any other. It's cold extracted. It's got all the components of vitamin E in the right proportions. So its absorption is guaranteed, and is one of the more powerful antioxidants. It's also very useful for cardiovascular diseases and, of course, for the prostate health, as I mentioned earlier on. Oops. That was my warning. Aloe Vera Plus helps with stress. Managing stress is one of the most beautiful drinks that there is. And then, of course, I'll just quickly go through. Masculine herbal is specifically for men's health. Unfortunately, it's not on the South African market, but it can be procured. It's on the Namibian market, slightly more expensive than it would be if it was here, but arrangements can be made if you speak to your upline. And then not to forget that, as we said, health begins with a clean home, with a non-toxic home. So that has to be part and parcel of men's health as well. You must remember, we may not do all the cleaning in the house, but the person who does should make sure that the house is clean and healthy. And then, of course, my presentation wouldn't be complete without talking about the detox. This must be done regularly, especially for the whole family. The new kids on the block, botanical balance, especially for when you're battling with your weight, it will help you to balance your glucose control, glucose metabolism, and will help people who have already developed diabetes get a better control of their sugar. And then last but not least, the newest kid on the block is magnesium, beautiful for stress management. I can vouch for that. I take mine last thing before I go to bed, covers me for 24 hours. Come what may at the hospital, I am covered. So that is what I thought I'd go through, and then allow time now for questions and answers so that we can address specific problems that you may have. I will also at this juncture say, because of the limit on Zoom, when we get timed out, we'll close and reopen. So please, if we go off, log in immediately after about 10-15 seconds. So now it's open to questions. I'll stop sharing. And those of you who would like to ask a question, sorry, apologies, I got the wrong thing.
Stop sharing.
There we go, thank you. You unmute yourself and ask a question. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, wow. Welcome Nolwazi and Nyameka and other people who hopped on a bit late. If you want us to hop back on, you're most welcome. But right now we've got about 7 minutes. So if there's anybody who would like to ask anything specifically, please unmute and ask, or make a comment even.